Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Klein, and on behalf of Caresoft Technology Corporation, I would like to welcome all of you to our REI Systems webcast, Maximizing Grant Impact with an Automated Grants Management System. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. The audio portion of this webcast can be heard through your computer speakers, or if you prefer, you can use the dial-in displayed on the screen to listen through your telephone. All lines are muted to reduce any background noise. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat pod on the left side of your screen, and we will do our best to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do not get to your questions, our team will certainly follow up with you offline. To tell you a little bit about Caresoft, we are a trusted government IT solution provider, delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, local, and education customers. Caresoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including Salesforce, VMware, and Symantec. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please do not hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. This webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Stephen Maduli-Williams, Community Development Program Manager for the City of San Diego. With that, Stephen, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. Good afternoon/good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Stephen Maduli-Williams, and I am a program manager in the City of San Diego's Department of Economic Development, and specifically, I manage the Community Development Division. My core responsibilities really rely on managing a large portfolio of federal funds which are earmarked to invest in projects located in San Diego's low and moderate income communities. The particular agenda for this presentation really focuses on talking a little bit about what we've done historically, but more importantly, looking at how we've used technology, particularly GovGrants and Salesforce, to really help us handle a couple challenges, which I'll speak to now. One of the first challenges we had is that our division historically has managed roughly about $10 million a year in federal funds. Well, let's say closer to $15 million a year in federal funds. And the processes that we've used have been typically manual processes that were paper-driven, a lot of Excel spreadsheets, and not a real good repository of real great data about the work that we do and how we would manage our portfolio. One of the big challenges that this presented for us is that we were fortunate enough to really secure about $215 million in new Cdbg program income to invest, which would, for all intents and purposes, triple the amount of dollars that we would invest. So we would go from investing roughly $15 million a year to closer to $45 million a year, and primarily with the same staffing level. And one of the things that I surmised relatively quickly was that we did not have the infrastructure to handle such an increase in our portfolio and all the responsibilities that go along with it. And as we get closer to the demo, I'll talk a little bit about some of the different elements from a process standpoint that are important for us to touch upon. So in terms of what we typically invest in, we do everything from building shelters from the homeless, not only just the brick and mortar, but also providing public service dollars. We have specialized economic development projects. We provide rental assistance. We are an investor in affordable housing as well. And another area that we're starting to get involved in quite a bit is workforce development. So as you can see, we've got a variety of different programs that we invest in and monitor. In terms of specific federal funding programs that we operate, first and foremost, we manage the city's entitlement of the community development block grant funds. We also manage the home funds, the Home Investment Partnership Program. We also manage the HOPA program, which is a housing program specifically for persons with HIV and AIDS. And then lastly, particularly targeted toward homeless, we manage what's called the ESG program, the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. And again, that's used to address homelessness. So as I said before, we received a significant increase in funding. And last year this time, our funding level was just over $14 million. For FY18, as you can see, that number jumps out to roughly $42 million, roughly $43 million. And a big chunk of that is community development block grant dollars, which is, I don't know how many of you are in the community development block grant world, but as an entitlement city, normally we get about $10 million a year. Because we've received this excess program income, that number's jumped up to $28 million a year. And as cities goes, that's, even though we're San Diego, we're probably the eighth largest city in America, that's more on the level of New York and LA and Chicago in terms of how much funds that really represents. So some of our key outcomes, particularly for the last fiscal year, we were able to put about 140 people, assist 140 people into housing with tenant-based rental housing, rapid rehousing vouchers. We've served about 8,500 people in our homeless shelters. We've worked with about 250 businesses. In terms of facility investments, about 143,000 people benefited from some of our public facility investments. We've provided direct assistance to home buyers, roughly 24 first-time home buyers. In the HOPA program, roughly 108 individuals were able to be housed in that program. And then in terms of low and moderate income individuals directly benefited from some of the services that our grantees provided, roughly about 8,300. And then in terms of direct jobs created from economic development activities, roughly about 60 jobs. And again, this is just kind of a snapshot of some of our outcomes from the last fiscal year. So as I said earlier, some of the challenges we have were related to just the lack of infrastructure. And again, very complex and inconsistent process. Again, we've been a federal recipient of federal funds for a long time, but ultimately our internal processes have not really caught up with where we needed to be. Again, as I said earlier, a real paper-based process, which is prone to potential errors. Also, no real-time ability to really see our grant status in terms of, and again, as we get into the demo, we can talk a little bit about the ability to manage a portfolio and have an understanding of, from a granting standpoint or notice of funding availability standpoint, knowing just exactly where a grant is in the life cycle and what's going on with that grant, with that application. I think one thing that's real important about this system that we've been able to do and that we really needed to do, particularly where we're headed in the future, is that we need to be able to increase the type of organizations that we've invested in and the type of projects. And having Salesforce or ED Grants has allowed us to really diversify our portfolio of investments. Again, it was a very manual process in terms of tracking data from our grant recipients and reporting, and then aggregating that data and then reporting back to HUD. In this case, was a very cumbersome process. And then also, again, a lot of discrepancies between the records that we had and the records that our recipients had, and so there's always a lot of cleanup associated with that. Again, in terms of the compliance piece and reporting, again, a very manual process that really turned out to be fairly costly for us over time. And then lastly, Again, being limited in terms of the number of staff, there's no way without a system like GovGrants that we'd be able to scale up to handle the new investment funds that we will receive. And so technology, this cloud-based platform really allows us to do a significant amount of work with the same resources, or even less, to be perfectly honest. So in terms of approaching this particular challenge, we felt fairly strongly that a web-based application or a cloud-based application was the key or the answer for us. And so, we began a search process of trying to identify potential vendors. And Salesforce is always kind of higher on our list just because of the flexibility and also the contact management component to it as well. We felt that after reviewing a couple of different applicants that the GovGrants product by REI was by and large the best product that we saw. The fact that they've kind of gone through, they've worked with several federal agencies and organizations that were grantors like ourselves as well, that had some of the same challenges in terms of federal reporting. We felt as though they gave us a value add that was pretty hard to beat. And I'll talk a little bit later about how that impacted our ability to actually get this done a lot quicker than normal. So again, this was kind of a centralized technology solution. We really turned into kind of a turnkey system for us. And what I mean by turnkey, meaning that ideally we're able to engage a client, a potential client or potential applicant from the RFQ, request for qualifications process, and follow that application all the way through closeout in 24 months, and then final closeout 5 years after that. Because as it relates to community development investments, particularly HUD investments, typically we invest in projects, and even though we'll make an investment for 12 months or 24 months, we have to stay invested in that project, particularly if it's a non-housing project, up to 5 years, and for a affordable housing project, we have to stay invested up to 30 to 55 years, depending on the type of project. So having a system that allows us to move, to track activity from initial stages all the way through completion, and again, that could be 5 years after an award or 30 years, depending on the type of project, was really important for us. The efficiency component of the system has been really pretty amazing. And that's something that, as a city in general, the city of San Diego is really pushing toward being innovative and efficient. And the REI system, the Salesforce, so the GovGrants platform really fit the bill for us there. The automation, again, it eliminates human error, and it allows our people to be more strategic and thoughtful about the work that we do, and we're not really kind of stuck into mundane processing of applications and vouchers and things like that. All that is automated. I would say we went from being maybe having 25% automation of the work we do to about 75% overnight. And so that's been very exciting. From an accountability standpoint, it's been really, really helpful, both from a fiscal standpoint and also from a programmatic standpoint. What it's allowed us to do is really have great real-time data, and it's also allowed us to really launch what we call performance management systems, where we can actually track the performance and track the annual performance of our organization, score them based on that performance, and then ultimately have that impact the ability to score the next year round. So in our Cdbg HUD world, the two real things are really important from an accountability standpoint. One is the organization has to meet the national objective, meaning that if they have to invest in a low and moderate income community in a sustainable way, and number two, they have to complete their projects on time. And this GovGrants allows us to really hold organizations completely accountable on both those fronts in a real-time basis, not waiting 30, 60, 90 days to get data and to analyze that data before we can actually take action. Now we can take action 2 days after we find that there's some issue with our organization. Again, in terms of productivity, that really, again, is really critical for us because we're doing triple the work that we've done in the past. And from a portfolio management standpoint, it's really critical for us not only to deploy a lot of capital, but also make sure that those investments, deliver an appropriate return on investment for the city. And the other component of it is that we've got a variety of different projects, everything from infrastructure to homeless shelters to planning, sustainable, not planning, but invested in sustainable products for single-family homeowners to invested in smart streetlights. So we've got an incredible bucket of projects that we're doing, and staff having the ability to be more managers of projects opposed to processes of documents makes all the difference in the world. And again, this has allowed us to really truncate some of our cycles, which will hopefully lead to even more efficiencies. And so what I mean by that is, for instance, after we award a grant, we get into the contracting phase, and those of you that do this kind of work understand that. But and we have to generate a contract and eventually have various city departments sign off on that contract before it gets routed to the grantee and ultimately have them sign off on it in a very short period of time. And usually this would take us about 4 months to go from award to contract. Now, with this system, we're able to do that in roughly about 2 weeks at most. And that's a combination of automation, but it's allowed us to really truncate a process that was really actually very painful for us on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of a centralized grants management system, again, I go back to kind of the turnkey approach to this. It really allows us to holistically look at our business model and what it is that we do and how effective we are. And this tool allows us to, again, plan, manage the applications, review the applications, and I'll talk a little bit about that, make awards, manage those awards, and eventually close out the projects. Fairly turnkey, and again, it incorporates about 95% of our past business processes. So again, these are just some of the benefits and the modules that are associated with both ourselves in terms of, the various modules that we would use, and again, what a grant recipient would actually utilize as well. So ultimately, with GovGrants, this is kind of some of the early impacts that we've had, and I would say we're about 70% through our implementation process. So first and foremost, and this is something that was very sensitive for us, is that it had to be a user-friendly process, primarily because we've got a universe of nonprofits that probably have not used a web-based system before, and so it was new to them, it was new for us. And so I feel comfortable saying that we've accomplished that goal, meaning that in terms of the feedback we've got from grant recipients, for potential applicants, is that everyone was generally pretty pleased about this process. They felt that the web-based system made it very transparent. It was very easy. It was a very easy application process. There was some automated things that we added to the application process in terms of calculators and things like that, that really was, light years better than what we've used in the past. The ultimate result for us was that we're able to receive 33%. We're able to receive a 33% increase in applications. So we're really excited about that. Last year, I think we had about 50 applicants. This year, we had about 73. Next year, we're going to be shooting to go over 100 applications. So we're, really, really excited about that, particularly just the user interface and how the nonprofit community has really responded to it. Again, the workload has definitely been decreased. And, well, let's just say this, the amount of inefficient workload has been decreased, primarily because we have more applications. It is more applications. It was a little bit busier, particularly for our reviewers, and also for our applicants, because, again, they did everything on the web and attached documents, so it wasn't, again, a manual process where they would have to typically put together binders of papers, run down to City Hall, and try to get here before Friday at 5 p.m. Everything was done on the web, and once, our deadline was 5 p.m., people upload the documents, complete the application in the system. Once they're registered, and the system shuts down, and they were done. So again, very, very smooth process that was easier for everyone involved. One of my personal favorites is just to enhance portfolio and financial management. And, that's really, really key for us, primarily because we are managing a lot of funds. And one of the tasks, particularly being one of the challenges with investing so much money, particularly quickly, is that from a global scale, we have our own test to pass as a city, even though we know we have performance management standards for a grantee. We're also reviewed and evaluated from HUD, particularly on, whether or not our projects meet the national objective, they get completed on time, and then more importantly, that we are actually dispersing funds on an annual basis in a timely manner. And the system has been a godsend in terms of being able to look at how much capital we have out on the street and how quickly that capital is moving among projects. So we're excited about that. The improved data quality, that kind of goes without saying. Again, we moved from a universe where we use Excel and to some, Excel pretty exclusively, Excel spreadsheets to accumulate data about what's going on with our respective projects. And thankfully, I can say that we've moved away from that completely. And again, the productivity has increased primarily because we can do a lot more with a lot less. And again, for example, our scoring, we have an independent panel, community panel that scores our applicants, each and every one of them. And historically, we would give them paper, and they would, score the applicants. And this year, because of Grants, we created a web-based scoring platform where each of our scorers got passwords. They were able to log into the system. We had a scoring rubric, and they were able to kind of put in their scores. The system automatically tabulated the scores, the winners, by categories, and I'll show you an example of that later. Again, that process went from, weeks and weeks to, just a few hours to score an application. So we're pretty excited about that. And again, just to increase and enhance reporting capabilities, being able to go into Grants and click on either a custom report or a standard report and spit out information real time has been a pretty amazing difference for us. So what I'd like to do now is kind of talk a little bit about the demo portion, and I'm going to go into the actual application to talk through roughly about 5 different elements. And I'm going to just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so the web page that's up in front of you now is really kind of our home page for Grants, and this initial page is really giving us a snapshot of what it is that we are looking to accomplish. So at the top, where you have this home, we have about really 5 key tabs. We have this home button. This is really kind of our dashboard. But we also have a planning tab, a NOFA tab, applications tab, projects tab, and then ultimately a tab which is really kind of, again, a more detailed version of the snapshot, which also allows us to log into our reporting applications. So this snapshot also serves to, a better way to describe this is that this function is really kind of driven by a task. And so it allows us to have an idea, quickly know what tasks, individual tasks that are pending for not only for ourselves but also for the grantees as they move through the application process. And so I just want to kind of mention that real quickly. What I'll start showing you very relatively quickly is the planning tab. This is really kind of where we strategically determine what it is that we're going to do from a funding and programmatic standpoint. And so typically before we set up the NOVA, we want to have an idea about what are our funding streams. And in our case, we have two funding streams that we use. One is Cdbg program income, and the other is Cdbg entitlement. And each one of those amounts has a respective account, which we load up here in the system. So, for instance, we had about roughly $5 million in Cdbg program income and roughly $4.8 million in entitlement funds, $4.9 million in Cdbg entitlement funds. So those two funding buckets were used to fund a variety of different project areas. And so, for instance, we've got 5 different funding accounts, and one of them being, nonprofit improvement projects, public service projects. We have a separate account for revolving loans and small businesses. We have another category called community economic development and challenge grants. So this is kind of our snapshot of knowing these are kind of our funding buckets. Here's our 2 accounts. These are the funding buckets of how we decided to fund them. And then those actually translate into actual RFPs. So in this case, we roughly have, 8 different RFPs which we've created NOVAs for. So, and I'll kind of go into that tab next. But so every year we'll go into this planning site, this planning page, and we'll create an application, an application funding bucket. In this case, it's community development block grant. This year it's $9.9 million. Next year, that number is going to be significantly larger, let's say $20 million, and we'll create a set of programs which we'll load into the system to kind of create our NOVAs. So even though we had about 8 different programs, we created 3 separate NOVAs. One gigantic NOVA, which roughly had about $8 million in it, and that's really for kind of the Cdbg kind of core programming activities. And because they were going out at a different time and they were actually a little bit unique, we had 2 separate RFPs, 2 separate NOVAs for a small business revolving loan fund and also for a business accelerator. And so what this really means is that these will be 3 separate RFPs or NOVAs for various organizations to apply for. And I'll spend the most time talking about our Cdbg program because that's where the lion's share of our applications came in at. So what's neat about this page is that we're actually able to see, what was the current status of the applications. In this case, we received, again, 73 applications. I'll scroll down. 73 actual applications, even though there are 85 organizations who registered, only 73 actually were able to apply. And what's really neat about this is that we've got real-time information, and particularly being a city entity, one of the questions that always comes up is how many people applied, who applied, where they're from, general information like that. Everyone wants to know who's applied for funding, where they're from, what district, let's say what council district they're in, how much they've applied for, what kind of project, those kind of things. So having this basic application information allows us to be able to answer questions like that or generate a report for things like that. And the great thing about this this tab is that we're able, again, to see all, you can see I'm just going through all the different applications by type. So public services, which is really kind of one of our basic categories, we had 24 applications. For state sustainability, which was one of our categories, we had 8. We had another special category, which we call challenge grant, where RFP, where we had 26. So it's really neat and great to be able to look at the data, again, on a real-time basis to see who's applied and what specifically. And so if you go to your left hand, one of the things that's really kind of neat is if I go into managing reviews, I can get an idea. I can begin to see what's going on with the overall NOVAs from a review standpoint. So, for instance, for the Cdbg program, it says there's 76 applications. For the Small Business Revolving Loan Fund, unfortunately, we only had 1 application, but that's still under review, as well as the Business Accelerator, where we actually had 8 applications, and that's still under review. And we can see pretty quickly that the review for the Community Development Block Grant Program is completed. So again, as another step, we can just kind of see the detail of what's happened in the review process. First step is that, they're reviewed for completeness and correctness. There were a total of 76 applications, of which only 73 got promoted to the next level. 3 were rejected because they weren't complete. Again, this is also very important data because we can actually generate an automatic email to the recipient saying that, unfortunately, your application was not complete, and you are not moving forward in the process. And so that was one of the really kind of neat things that that's attached to this platform that we're really excited about. The next step is that we have an internal review, and again, fortunately here, all 73 applicants met our internal review, which is really more of a fiscal review. And then lastly, this is kind of our real scoring piece where we actually had an external review, and all 73 applications were reviewed. There's really no real promotion at that point. It becomes a real function of the scores. So this is kind of a summary of the review decisions that were made and the actual scores. So and I'm going to take a little bit to talk about this because again I love this so much because one, it allows us to be really transparent because as you know, any of you that fund organizations, be it nonprofit or for-profit, or do RFPs, scoring is always one of the big challenges. Coming up with a transparent and accurate scoring process is always kind of the bane of your existence. And the thing that we're excited about is that we've got independent reviewers who will, for each category, they will review the applications and begin to score them. So in this case, we reviewed all. This is just a review of all the score of all applications, and this is not by category. But as you can see, for all applications, we had an application by a group called Grid Alternatives, which scored the highest of the 73, and then we had another one that came in second place with the same score. But this is a really dynamic process that really allows us to be transparent and move quickly and effectively and be in a position to handle a lot of questions that we get about what happens from a granting process. So in terms of projects, this is basically kind of our final step before we go to our next phase, which is really contract award. And so these are all the organizations that are funded, and I'll just here click on one example. So in this case, this is prior to we're in the process of actually moving them to contract status soon. But as you can see, right now it's in a draft form. This actual application, this project is in a draft form. It'll be considered active once the contract is generated, and then the complete close, at least for this component of it, will be once the contract is signed and awarded and the project is moving forward. And again, this just has basic information about the organization. And let's see here. If I've got any different. All right, so this one is yet to have a draft contract. Let's see here. I may ask my consultant for a little help here. Hey, Raul. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Hey, I want to actually pull up a sample contract form.
So go ahead and click on the drafted version. And then if you open, actually you can click on the number 3 or any one of them on the action there. So that's going to bring up the your detailed contract. You could see the communication back and forth with the recipient. You can see the detailed budget on the budget tab, and then the formal agreement that gets generated, it's on the top, the view agreement button. But what you're showing right now is the communication back and forth with the recipient for the collaboration purpose.
So, and this is a component that we were really also excited about, because what typically happens once we make an award, there typically is a lot of collaboration between ourselves and the organization, and sometimes that goes great, and sometimes it becomes very drawn out and fairly laborious. One of the beautiful things about this system is that it allows us to really focus in on what the key issues are in terms of moving from a grant award to an actual contract. And as Raul pointed out, one of the neat features is that as we communicate about, for instance, a missing document, in this case, we communicated, our staff person, Liz, had communicated with the nonprofit about the commercial liability insurance coverage document. And, it's one of the key, I wouldn't say it's like pulling teeth, but getting organizations to complete all the documentation that's necessary to get to actual contract has always been kind of a challenge for us. But the great thing about this software is that it allows them to not only send a document very quickly, but also comment with us and ask questions and get a response relatively quickly. And we have everything from the date and time that we've communicated with them, and whether or not a document has been sent. And so what I talked about earlier before is that this kind of tracks the life cycle of going from, once a contract was awarded, then, it's created, and there's we'll send out comments for revisions. The recipients make revisions. We sign off on that. We're in the process of making revisions with this one now. Hopefully soon it'll be under approval, issued, and then amended. And then what I'll show you real quickly is that, and this is one of the things that's been a real time saver for us, is that we've been able to really shave off the time it takes to physically create this agreement. And so now, before it was a universal, we spent a lot of time sending documents back between the recipient, ourselves, city attorney's office, procurement office, and now it's just as simple as, and please let me know if you're all able to see this agreement, because it came up as a separate PDF for me. But so now we've got.
Even it may have gone to your other monitor. You may want to move it on the left.
All right, let me do that. Okay. Yeah, I may have to, I'm not getting it to move to the second monitor. Let's see here. Can you see it now or no?
We are not seeing it, but I think we can share that later on.
All right. So in essence, basically, we've got a 48-page city contract generated, relatively quickly, in a matter of seconds. And obviously, this is a preloaded contract where, with the consultant, what we did was we created a template. We had that template signed off by the various city departments up front, and then we worked with the consultant to design a program embedded within a system that took key data from each application and embedded it in the contract. So for every application, we had 73 awards. We would follow the same process, meaning that data from their original application will be pulled and embedded in the contract, and that we've had pre-approved by city attorney's office and by procurement department, in such a way that now all we have to do is, hit view agreement, and now we've got access to a contract that would have normally taken us 3 to 4 months to get to this stage, and now we can do that overnight. And this is something that'll be built into the system going forward. So that's just an example of one of the incredible time savers that having this particular grants management system has had for us. And also I can't begin to underscore the importance of having a consultant with a very good bedside manner, because again, as an organization, we've never done any process mapping. So we kind of did two things at once. We kind of looked at our processes for improvement, but we also implemented this new software platform at the same time. So having a consultant that was willing to work with us and really brainstorm about what are some strategies, what are some things that we can do to utilize a system that will allow us to be more efficient and effective, and one of the big ones for us is automatic generation of a contract. And so, and they were able to brainstorm with us and to figure out a way to make that happen. So again, I can't begin to say how pleased we were at being able to enhance our workflow just by this one application. So the last tab really is what we call kind of it's the kind of a screenshot, overall screenshot that we use for quick information and data, but also it also allows us, this is where we would do our custom reports, and I'm going to pull up a couple real quick. One real important report for us that's, again, is something that we always have to supply to city council members or the mayor's office or someone like that, is, again, who you're funded and why. And so this particular report allows us to get custom information on, for instance, what was the program area, what was the funding bucket that we funded from, and then how much is available. And this is kind of good not only for external parties, but really good for us in terms of, again, managing a portfolio, knowing how much we've actually been able to allocate for a given area. So I'm going to, let's see here. All right, I'm not going to do that one. So let's see here, more reports. Let's see here. One thing that was really interesting to be able to track is how many people were using the system. And as with any RFP process, we had a lot of applicants who utilized the system. We gave them about 30 days to complete the application process, and on day 29 and on the morning of the 30th day, we had a ton of people on the system trying to complete their applications. Pretty fascinating human nature, but that's the way it happens. But being able to get an idea about who accessed the system and why was important for us. Also, there's cost considerations because with the Salesforce platform, we pay for a number of touches by not only our internal staff but also external staff. So being able to track the logins was important from that perspective. But all in all, this is just basically a combination. This is just an example of applications that we've had. I mean, I'm sorry, a reporting application that we have. These are custom, but there's some also standard ones as well. I'm trying to see. Let's see if scoring comments. So that one I don't have privileges to. Let's see. That one either. Okay.
Stephen, Rahul again. Are you showing the reports on the other monitor? We're not seeing. We're still seeing the drafted project.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure what happened there. All right. Let me try it now. So I'm assuming that we're all on the Can you see the custom report page now?
I'm still seeing the project.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to go in and out of demo real quick. Okay. Where are you in the?
We can.
Got,
thank you.
You're there. Okay.
Yes, yes.
All right. So I'm gonna. I'm going to show some of the reporting that we've. Again, some of the reports the customer reports that we can actually generate relatively quickly. And in this case, this is a report by project type. So this first category is what we call challenge grants, a very highly subscribed grant process, RFP process. There are 18 organizations that were secured funding, and again, this is what's neat is that we've got what the total budget was, how much they requested, and what the total budget availability was, how much they requested, and how much they received. And so, so again, these are just kind of easy 2-second reports that we can generate to give us real basic information. In this case, again, it's by category. This is a business accelerator program. These are the 8 applicants and all their respective funding requests. Total 52 applicants for all programs involved. Let's see here. Let's see. This is another good one for us in terms of. Oh, that one's. And again, this report just kind of gives us an idea about who actually applied and what they applied for. And again, this is data that we will have in perpetuity, which is actually really great because we can begin, not necessarily this year because this is the first year we've launched this program, but over the next several years, we can begin to do analysis about, how many times those specific organizations applied for grants, whether or not they were successful, and then ultimately, did they meet our performance criteria. And so again, this is just kind of a base application a base report that's really helpful for us. And right now it's just a custom range, but next year I'll be able to look at this data from 2 years and begin to analyze specific organizational performance and things like that. All right, well, I think that's it for the demo portion, and now I'm going to go back to the presentation. So the other thing that I didn't talk a whole lot about is that typically, and this is really, again, really about finding the right consultant. Our life cycle, our grants life cycle is really evolved from a grant cycle that was typically a full year to now one that is roughly 9 months because of this respective system. And the other key factor for us is that, ideally our grant cycle would start in, I would say, October, and started October with our request for qualifications that would lead into the NOVA and the RFP process. And so we started a little bit late, and so we're actually going to go back and do the RFQ component of this in the summer. But, one of our challenges was really fitting in this implementation of this new software platform. So we actually started with the RFP process. And so the goal was we tasked them really, typically our RFP starts in December. And so we really tasked the consultant REI with getting this platform together, up and running, and organizations able to apply for grants in roughly 6 weeks. And so it was really a fairly amazing process to get to, for them to really adjust, to really come in, analyze our workflow, look at what we're trying to accomplish, and really get us up and running so that we can actually kind of meet our grant life cycle. So we were able to get our grants done in December, and in terms of intaking all the applications. Our application review process typically was in January, so we caught up with that. So we actually had a system, web-based reviewing and scoring process up in January after only starting in November. So it was really pretty amazing. Right now we're finishing the award and issuance process, and our goal is, typically we have to have all our contracts signed by June 30th. That's the end of our fiscal year. And so that's what we're pushing for now, and you can see why that example of the automatically generated contract is really critical for us, because that has to be up and ready, up and completed and signed by June 30th, and we fund July 1. In July here, what we call post-award is basically our contract monitoring. And so basically every month our grant recipients are required to report both the program activity as well as financial activity. And so they generally, in this case, we're building that module as we speak, and the whole theory is that that'll be done in July. So generally speaking, after August 1, organizations will be able to come in after a demo session with a lot of the grantees, webinars, and things like that in terms of how to utilize the system, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that they'll actually be able to start submitting reports electronically through this grants management system. And so that would take us through basically July to have that done, and then we'll go back and redo the RFQ and do the RFQ component, and then our whole implementation will be complete. So again, it was an amazing job by REI to be able to really engage us in November and actually have a product that was ready for use and used in November, and in December as well, and scoring in January. So they've been working at light speed. So it's been, really, really amazing. And so those are some of the deadlines that we kind of had, and we said, can you meet them? And they met them basically. So So overall, kind of, and I'm going to, be more than happy to take as many questions as you like in terms of question and answers. Some of the key things for us is performance management and tracking. Again, being able to know, in our case, having so many diverse type of projects that we're funding, with a lot more organizations, being able to track their performance and manage their performance is pretty critical for us. Having a single data repository of all our information about our portfolio is huge. Again, historically our information was scattered really in paper files for all intents and purposes. A few Excel databases, maybe one Access database. None of them talk to each other. So, we would go run the 3 different pages. A better way to describe this is that typically we get a lot of requests from the mayor's office or from the media about what's going on with a certain project, and historically we'd have to scramble all over the universe to get that information, to search different databases and things like that. Now we have one central repository. If we want information about a specific organization, we know exactly where to go to get it and what they were doing with their respective project. Again, the business intelligence piece, that's going to be a big factor for us going forward because, particularly being able to analyze everything from application demand and demand by specific categories, and how we deploy capital will be really pretty critical. The automated reporting also will be very helpful as well. Obviously now we have new rules for business processes and workflows, so that's pretty exciting. In this case, I would call the IT component of this actually fairly seamless, and some of this obviously is because it's in the cloud. It's a much more robust environment for us. It's a much more robust environment for our end users, our nonprofit clients out there. Native interfaces with third-party systems, that's also obviously relatively helpful as well. This system allows us to make changes, particularly as it relates to if there's new regulations, as it relates to reporting and compliance. We've got the ability to make those changes on the fly within GovGrants. It helps cut fraud, waste, and abuse. It's a very transparent process. The scoring is very transparent, which is critical for our RFP process. Who got funded and how much, that's very transparent, the whole application. If we get a Freedom of Information Act for an application of a nonprofit, for instance, that's in trouble and gets on the media radar, we can, produce that data, relatively quickly. So things like that. And again, this is a mobile app, so that actually is, I've actually used it on my iPad quite a bit at home. And then also, lastly, the collaboration and sharing piece, that's been a real godsend in terms of how we interact, how our team and staff interact with the organizations that are getting funded, getting information to and from them. So I would say that, these are some things to kind of think about if you're considering a grants management system. And I will say that for us, it's been a real godsend, and it's been a significant change in how we do business. And I think I will open the floor for any questions that you all may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate you being with us and presenting today. We have a couple questions rolling in, so let's just get started. The first question, is the city using this for other programs or departments? How much tailoring was required to include Cdbg, national objective, and other program-specific criteria?
There was definitely some custom programming involved, and obviously there's a cost to that, but it was not not very difficult. When you look at the timeline in terms of how quickly we were able to get things done, it was not very difficult at all for the most part. And right now we're just using this primarily for Cdbg, and if we add more, for instance, if we may add more modules or something like that, but in our case, if it's a different city department, like the arts department, they would, pay for their component. And so we're for the most part, we're trying to keep this as a Cdbg standalone system, but and primarily because we're paying for it with Cdbg funds. But outside of that, if you're paying for it with a neutral source, you can use this with, any city grant program.
Terrific, thank you. Another question coming in. How do you do a modification or amendment, budget or narrative to a pre-existing grant?
Raul, I may let you take that question.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. So GovGrants product had a very robust amendment or modification process. So as Stephen talked about earlier on the slide, that we are in the process of deploying the post-award functionality, and the post-award allows you to take an existing grant, amend it for the budget, for the scope, for the narrative, for the key point of contact. So they are built in about more than six reasons where the award could be amended, and that's built into the GovGrants.
Thank you. A few more questions. What kind of training was provided to grantees or subrecipients to use the system and upload applications?
Sure. So we actually went pretty heavy on this, primarily because we're concerned about the user acceptance. And so not only did we have several sessions where we invited absolutely every potential grantee out. I think we had 3 where we actually did a live demo, a very detailed 2 to 3 hour live demo. Well, actually it was a half a day live demo for the software and how they would actually load their application, how they would get through. We really walked them through in great detail how they would actually apply utilizing this system. So not only did we have 3 kind of live sessions, we also had several webinars, posted several webinars that recipients could go to in any one given time. And then in addition to that, we actually had some sessions where actually applicants could actually come into our office, and if they didn't have access to the web, to actually work on their application, where kind of a one-on-one technical assistance session. So, 3 approaches, 3 large-scale demos, where I think each time we did it, we had about 40 to 50 organizations attend each one. Webinars, which were posted about every phase of the application process that they could go to at any time. And then lastly, one-on-one technical assistance sessions for people to utilize, get one-on-one assistance in getting through the grant process. And then we had a helpline set up as well, up until, 1 second before the application. Well, it was actually more 2 hours. We had a helpline up to about 2 hours before the grant application process closed.
Terrific, thank you. So we have 2 more questions. Can you customize the approval process based on the type of grant?
Yes and no. So in our case, we had, I guess maybe the question is, what do you mean by approval process? Because do you mean scoring or individual scoring, or do you mean just kind of an overall blanket approval? So I'll try to answer them both. So from a scoring process, yes. So but that in our case, for simplicity's sake, we kept our approval process similar, a scoring process similar for all the RFPs that went out, primarily because we had a third party reviewing those. But if we were doing an internal review, or if we were, primarily because of our approach to transparency, we don't generally approve applications ourselves, but I can see another entity having both an external process and an internal approval process. And so this system you can actually customize to do both. And I'm hoping that helped answer the question. So yes, you can have a different approval process based on grant type.
And Stephen, Raul, again, if I may add to that, GovGrants is a pretty flexible system. So when it comes to your approval processes, your workflows, your forms, what fields are there, we define at the program level, and they cascade to any notice of funding availability, funding opportunity, or solicitation. So they cascade down to that, and you have an option at that point to customize it for that particular funding availability. Now from that funding availability, as you're issuing the grants and awards, and if you want to change that at that level, you can change it for a specific grant as well. So idea here is take the best practices so you don't have hundreds of variation and there's a common and consistent processes. Define that at a program level. If needed, override at the funding opportunity level, and if needed further, we allow you to override that for a specific grant as well.
Terrific, thank you. We are a few minutes past 3 o'clock, so we are going to wrap up here. If we did not get to your questions here, we will be sure to follow up with you offline. I'd like to thank all of our participants who joined us today. We hope this webcast has been helpful for you and your organization. Again, this webcast has been recorded, and a copy of the presentation will be sent out to you. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us with the information before you on the screen. Thank you all.